Hey, did you hear PoE's dying? Again? Yeah, again. Didn't it die last week? Yep. Never stopped dying. Isn't that weird? Hi, Zizaran here with another video, and I wanted to talk a little bit about retention, the longevity of the game, and stuff like that. There's a lot of posts on Reddit lately, I feel like there's like 5 or 6 of these every single league. But there's one now, and people are talking about retention, and that is a good opportunity for me to chip in and bring my unwanted opinion into the matter because it's good content for YouTube. So thank you. Every league generally, or especially if people that don't like the league, it's very easy or common to say, oh, the league is dying, PoE is dying. So let's take a look at some stats and see if there's any truth to that. So we have a lot of different stats. Thankfully, people that are smarter than me have been like, yeah, there's a big Reddit thread here with loads of information. First, we'll look at the daily peak player count. And if you're just looking for a quick, like, is PoE dying? Like, no, of course it isn't. There's a lot of different factors that goes into like why the daily player count is different for different leagues. And it's not always just if the league is poggers or not. So here we can see a couple of the more recent leagues because obviously the game has been growing, right? It's been continuously growing. So if you are comparing it to very old leagues, it's gonna look a lot worse in the past, but the game is in a pretty healthy state with them generally doing better over time. Sometimes they'll do a miss and sometimes it'll be a hit. Also important to remember that some of these leagues came with really big expansions. And for example, Metamorph, I fucking hated Metamorph as a league. I hated the mechanic, didn't think it was particularly good, and it kept one-shotting me. However, it was the most enjoyable league I've ever played. Like, I just loved that time of the game. I just skipped the league mechanic, and the expansion with like Cyrus and everything like that was so good. And you can see that's very clearly reflected here because that's this pink line. Even though it only peaked at 116,000, it ended at 67,000. So it had really good retention. I think actually it had the best retention. Yeah, it pretty much had like the best retention out of all of them. So that's really good, and it's not weird to see why. And then obviously another really important example to talk about here is Delirium. Delirium did not have an expansion, so this is probably the most impressive league here. Personally, I hated Delirium because I was riddled with performance issues. I didn't have a good time. It's a very dark time for me. But it had really good retention, and that's without having a big expansion. So very impressively. Now let's look a little bit about the two most recent leagues, Ritual and Ultimatum, both peaking at insanely high numbers. So we can see that Ritual did really well, and it's very obviously interesting to see how important it is that the game does get like a big expansion. People like staying around for really big changes. And also this is only till day 25. Now, what's really impressive, Ultimatum. If we look at the start, this is actually insane because this isn't a big expansion. So obviously a lot of people are shitting on the Ritual versus Ultimatum stats and pointing out that Ultimatum is doing worse than Ritual. Well, of course it's going to be. Of course, no matter what, Ultimatum was very likely going to be worse than Ritual because it's not an expansion, right? And whenever it's just a league content, there's very rarely do we get something like Delirium where everybody is like pogging out and like, oh my god, the league mechanic is perfect. Because it's always more exciting when there's new bosses and new content coming out and it's a big change, especially if it's a big shakeup in the meta. And there's very many different builds you're playing. But either way, Ultimatum did surprisingly well. It peaked at 155,000, so it's almost as high of a peak as Ritual while not being an expansion. That's impressive in itself. And it was the worst launch we've ever had, pretty much. It was a disaster launch. Like, everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong. The servers were bad. It was a disaster launch. So it's obviously that has affected it as well. And without those, I think Ultimatum would have been a surprisingly good in every matter. I don't know how much it would have helped retention. That's hard to tell because obviously like day 2 and day 3 onwards, things weren't too bad. We had mostly like texture streaming issues and stuff to deal with, which were pretty bad. And I would say that also hurt retention quite a lot. But I wouldn't say that's the game dying. So Ultimatum does seem to have slightly worse retention than the other leagues, but it's not that surprising, right? There's a lot of other stuff happening right now. A lot of people are preparing for like the World of Warcraft TBC stuff. We've seen that in the past has had huge effects on the PoE numbers. I believe it was Bestiary that got absolutely crangled by that. And Bestiary actually had really, really good player retention, but it didn't have that many player numbers. It didn't have that many people playing. So obviously other games will affect it as well. We had Cyberpunk as well, has affected PoE and obviously like delayed the game. That was Heist. And Heist was obviously a very interesting episode of this year's Path of Exile. Here we look at the retention rate in a percentage, and we can see here on the left, I don't know if these on the left are just for the first 30 days or if it is for the entire league, but I'm guessing it is just the first 30 days. And we can see that Metamorph had a 72% retention rate. Delirium had 63%, even though it didn't have a big expansion. Heist had 64%, which is kind of wild to me. That's kind of crazy, actually, how high Heist had. And then Ritual 65 and Ultimatum 62. Harvest only 55. So Harvest had a very, very low retention rate. And again, there's so many different factors. Sometimes content is just really fun in the start. Like I remember, I don't know about you guys, but I loved Incursion. Incursion was my fucking favorite league for like 2 weeks. And then I was like, oh my God, I can't stand Incursion. So sometimes mechanics just aren't that replayable. They're just really, really boring to do over and over again. So there's a lot of different factors for why some leagues will do better than others. And obviously we can see like expansions are really, really good. And it also depends a lot on how you interact with the content, how smooth it is. So if we look at the Twitch viewership, we can see that Ultimatum here peaks at 255,000. This is actually probably a little bit skewed because of all the server issues happening. Honestly, I would say it would probably be like 180 to 200,000 if it wasn't for the server issues. I've sometimes joked at League Start, whenever the servers go down, my numbers personally will almost double, because so many people, they might not really care that much about streamers. They don't really give a shit what's happening at League Start. But when the servers go down or something crashes, they open the top stream and they look, is everybody else having this issue? So I would say that contributed massively because we had like an entire day of crashing and everyone was like, you know what, I might as well like shitpost in chat because I can't play the fucking game. So it probably would have been a lot worse on Twitch. And we can see that it does like go down pretty quickly, and it goes under Ritual on peak viewership. But that being said, it did really, really well for a long time. Personally, I've had a lot of growth this league, so I've been happy. I was actually surprised to see that it was worse than Ritual, because I think I'm personally doing better than Ritual. So it's been interesting. Obviously, a lot of that is I've been pushing hard on YouTube personally, but here are those interesting stats. So we can see like Delirium, which was horrible. It was my worst time streaming ever, and I'm surprised Delirium was that bad for everybody. But yeah, those are the numbers. So we can see that even just from Delirium to Ultimatum, it's gone from 118,000 on Twitch to 250,000. So it does have a very, very healthy growth. Part of that is also probably like the streamers that they have been paying. Like, you know, they paid Shroud, and so many people find the game through people like that. Path of Exile is a very good game, right? Hopefully, if you're watching this video, you agree that there's so many good things about Path of Exile, even though it has a ludicrous amount of bad things about it too. So, you know, it's a roller coaster for sure. But, you know, just not a lot of people have heard about it or tried it. And when they do, usually they end up liking it, or very often. So whenever they are bringing in new streamers, that will often bring more people to the game. It's been really, really cool to see. And that's great for people to find me, which, you know, good for me. Another thing which I failed to mention is it's very, very important to think about the things like Ritual. That was supposed to be a December release, and it is a really, really good time, like December, January, etc. It would have probably been way, way higher if it had actually released in December. They do work extra hard on their December releases as well. They always want those to be a bang. I don't think we're getting December releases anymore, because I think they quite like the new schedule, which I think is wild. I imagine as a company you monetize way better over Christmas, but what do I know? The time of year matters quite a lot as well for release dates. Like obviously, depending on like people having holiday, people having time off, that will reflect the numbers too. So generally, the slot we're in right now, Ultimatum, is usually the worst time. Or like generally, February to like March, April are like the worst time of the year. That's probably the best time to take time off. And it's been surprisingly good. So is Path of Exile dying? No. Can it die? Sure. They could do loads of mistakes. They have done loads. And hopefully they keep fixing things and keep working on things. I'd say the base game is in a pretty good state. I mean, they did a lot of changes in the right direction. This thing, a couple of strides in the wrong direction, like boss loot and stuff. Obviously, I made a lot of feedback videos. This thing, I think it has a pretty bright future. Looking at this, I actually like, I was kind of like, wow, 118,000 already in Delirium to 250 now. That's insane growth on Twitch. So hopefully the game has a big bright future. Obviously I rely on that a lot, so I'm pretty optimistic. And yeah, we'll be doing our best to keep pounding out content and hopefully give you guys a reason to stick around. So just wanted to make a reflect video on this, and hope you guys enjoy the content. Sub if you do. More importantly though, try to die less than I do.